I tell people my story wasn't that I was, taken to the gates of heaven and like, I was just pulled over my body.
Mm.
It was like I could see this version of me, and I saw these like two beautiful kind of like squiggly, jellyfishy, pulsating orbs of light.
Welcome to the Design of You podcast. My name is Leah. I'm a human design expert, spirituality coach, wellness guru, and manifestation powerhouse. My podcast is here to educate, inspire, and uplevel your life. I love sharing with you the ins and outs of the human design system in a practical, empowering, and embodied way. Thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to seeing you in the show. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of The Design of You. Oh, today's episode has been a long time coming. I recorded this episode, I don't even remember when. It was probably back in, I want to say November or December, maybe even earlier than that, with the beloved Anna Grace Newell, who, if you guys, a lot of you guys actually in my world, I think a lot of you that listen to my podcast, found me through Anna Grace. She is the host of the podcast AG University, and she is just amazing. Anna does Akashic Records, and she is very much a fashion influencer, and she really is someone that I admire because she takes a modern approach to spirituality, and she brings kind of energy work and spirituality and all that stuff to the world in a very digestible, new age way. And I very much appreciate that because I'm someone who is very passionate about making spirituality digestible, normalizing being spiritually gifted. And what's funny is how I met Anna Grace was actually through me just being a guest on her podcast. She had me on, I think, in the beginning of 2023. So January 2023. It's a really great episode. We'll link it down below. And basically, I was on her podcast talking about human design, and it was a really cool moment because we had one of those situations where we get on the call and we chatted for like an hour before we recorded, and we just vibe, we just get each other, and she goes and takes a sip of her coffee or matcha or whatever she was drinking, and it said Projector. It was a Projector mug, and I created those mugs. I no longer sell them right now on Etsy. That's where I used to do everything on Etsy. Did you guys know I need to do a deep dive of like my business in the beginning and like everything that I've done in the Design of You? I think it would be really fun to just do a whole episode on like mistakes and learnings and things in business and stuff like that. But one of the first things I did when I got into human design was like, I just loved it. And I wasn't knowledgeable enough in human design to be able to, I think, teach it. And I was just doing readings, and then I did something called chart summaries, and I started with something that I called the basics chart summary, and then I did in-depth chart summaries, and I sold them on Etsy. Etsy was like my biggest driver for years. And then I started to do merchandise. I was like obsessed with creating like mugs and t-shirts and stuff like that. And so I created these energy type mugs, and I honestly didn't sell a ton of them. I mean, I could probably look at the analytics, like less than 30 people in the world probably have this Projector mug. And so it was just so funny. I'm like, oh, I created that mug. And she was like, wait, what? And she's like, literally, my boyfriend got this for me for Christmas or for her birthday. I can't remember which one it was, like years prior. And, or maybe it was just like a year prior to that. And so she's like, yeah, he knew how much I was into human design. And so what a like full circle moment. She ended up creating a reel on that, which was really funny just to see kind of that, like just to hear that story. And it was just one of those moments where you just know like, okay, we're meant to be chatting and meant to be like talking together. And it's a really cool episode though. We're diving into a topic we've never talked about here. And it's actually something I didn't know a lot about, Akashic Records. And Akashic Records, actually, I'm not even going to explain it because Anna's going to get into it, but it's really this amazing modality. And I think it's very similar to doing psychic mediumship work, which, as you guys know, if you've listened to past episodes, I have been working on my psychic mediumship gifts under Emily the Medium. And that's been just a big part of my journey in the entire 2023. So it was really cool to talk to her because it was this conversation happened in like, I don't know, November, December, end of the year of 2023. So it was like really cool to have this conversation after I have after I completed my journey with Emily and really opened myself up for some of this energy work. But Anna Grace is amazing. You have to follow her on Instagram. We'll link everything down below, but you guys are really going to enjoy this conversation. It's something new, and I'm really excited to start bringing in more conversations on like different topics in spirituality. I really want to start talking about wellness. I think that there is a massive pivot coming within my business that I'm really excited to talk to you guys about. I don't want to share too much before I'm ready because I tend to get really excited about projects and then I share a little early, as I've done with my app and my book. So I keep it pretty open and honest here. So, but I'm really trying to refrain from doing that and being a little less open, not because I don't want you guys to get excited about everything, just because I think timelines change. There's stuff that goes on behind the scenes, and sometimes it's not great for me to share until I have really aligned timelines. And also things change. Like, there's a lot of things that I have been working on that I've decided I don't want to work on anymore. And so, yeah, there's just a lot of shifts happening at the Design of You. There's a lot of changes you guys are going to start seeing, or probably have already been seeing on Instagram. We're going to be doing a lot of more personal content. I'm hearing you guys loud and clear. I've asked, what do you want to see on stories? What do you want to know? You guys are very interested in my personal life. And I think that I've had this limiting belief. I've had this limiting belief where I just assumed that you guys didn't want to know about my personal life on my Design of You Instagram. So I was very much focusing on sharing. I just share here and there. I'm not I feel like I don't share everything. I mean, who does? Truly, that would just, no one has the time to share every corner of their life. But on my personal Instagram, I share a lot about who I am and all these things. And so I just kind of had this thought that if people want to know me or get to know me personally, they can just follow that page, and then I'll focus on human design on the Design of You. And I hear very loud and clear from you guys that, well, a lot of you guys just don't follow my personal account, which is totally fine, but honestly maintaining 2 accounts is a challenge. And so I have been trying to navigate how I want to show up in both places. And so I'm really going to get back into sharing a lot more about me on the Design of You. And I think that makes more sense because that's where more of you are anyway. And then, eventually as my business grows and my team grows and things like that, then I'll probably start to shy away a little bit more and then, return back to my personal page. I don't know. Who knows? But what I can tell you guys right now is that I will be showing up a lot more personally. I want to share with you guys a lot more about my life and what human design has really done for my life in all fronts. I want to talk more about my story of leaving my corporate career and then, becoming a human design reader. I want to talk more about, wellness and manifestation. Those of you who've been with me for a long time, I used to have a blog called Moon Girls Plate. It wasn't a blog, actually. That's not the right word. It was a Foodstagram, an Instagram page. Didn't have a ton of followers, just about 1,000. And I used to share a lot about food and wellness and things like that. And that was really my outlet into discovering, I really like sharing on Instagram. I'm very open. I like to share what I'm doing. I like to share my creativity. And so I'm wanting to bring a lot more of that back. And I want to bring it to the Design of You, because the Design of You is really all about how you were designed and how you can really create your life based on the energy that you have. And it's all about working with your energetics to create this beautiful life. And so I want to talk about life creation and my dream, the fact that I feel like I'm truly living my dream life because of human design. And so I want to be a little bit more authentic to me. I think for a long time I have been afraid to share exactly who I am because I had this identity of who I think a human design reader should be. And I think that was morphed from everyone else in the human design space. And I'm some of the things that other people are, but I'm not all of those things. No one's me. And no one's me and I'm no one else, that's authenticity. And so that's really where I'm at. And that's where my heart is. And so there's going to be some changes, I guess, around that in some capacity. So anyway, that's not what the purpose of this episode is about. I'm just kind of giving you guys random little tidbits and things like that. So let's start talking to Anna Grace Newell on all things Akashic Records. Guys, if you were this feels woo-woo or you don't know anything about Akashic Records, this is going to be a really fun episode. And Anna Grace has a podcast called AG University, which I mentioned that I was on, and she's just so fun to listen to. She's in my rotation. I listen to her podcast. I'd love to share a little bit more about the podcast I listen to, because if you guys didn't know, I'm a podcast just fiend. Like, I literally consume so much podcast content. So I think you guys are really going to enjoy this conversation and this episode. And I just cannot wait for you guys to get to know Anna Grace, follow her, support her, love her, and, celebrate her really bringing spirituality into a modern lens and bringing it to the world and normalizing this sort of work in our everyday life. So without further ado, let's welcome our guest, Anna Grace Newell. We are here with Anna Grace, AG University, to talk all things Akashic Records. Anna Grace is truly just one of the most magical human beings, and I'm so lucky that she is here. And we were just talking before we jumped on that we have like random synchronicities in our life and like connections and people that we know. So it's just a small world, and I feel like she's someone who we vibe. We have a similar kind of like following in terms of like the people that are attracted to both of us tend to be in the same kind of realm. So I'm just excited for you guys to introduce her if you don't already know who she is. So Anna Grace, if you want to just share everything about who you are, starting from the top, let's hear it.
Hi guys, I'm so excited to be here. I am also a fan of Leah because I love all things human design, and I feel like we have so many things that we could talk about here. We could probably do a 5-hour recording, but
I should say that you are a 1-3 projector for those of you who just wanted to know.
Oh, yes. I'm a 1-3 projector, and I am a very, very, very much so projector through and through. And I am the founder and the lead professor at AG University, which is a podcast that I started. It was originally just a school from the cosmos, but now it is morphed into a school that has been founded to reconnect women with their intuition. So I'm really similar as Leah in the sense of I'm like, come one, come all. We are speaking the universal language of love and energy. So kind of like no matter what people believe, I feel like I break things down on like, okay, how can we feel more connected to ourselves, to our body, to our intuition? Because ultimately, like just being in the present moment and listening to ourself and feeling good and happy is like the most spiritual thing that we can do or be on this planet. So I feel like I share a lot of tangible, easy to digest kind of story times, and the podcast has been my passion project, but it's turning into doing like live events. I'm an Akashic Records practitioner. For those of you who are hearing me for the first time, I'm an intuitive guide, clairvoyant medium, anything in the energy space I've dabbled. So I've stepped into doing live readings and events. We were just talking when I was in LA, I did a live influencer event for Symbiotica, reading for all their top creators. So I dabble in a lot of things. I wear a lot of hats, but I will say that I feel like my true gift is helping people activate their intuition and reconnect with themselves. So it's a little bit about me.
Yeah. Oh, I love it so much. You do so many cool things, and your story really didn't begin with being in the spiritual realm. And I think that that's what's so cool about you is that you kind of had this transformative event that happened in your life that led you down this path of getting closer to yourself. And I find that either people kind of like are born with it and they either lose it and come back in a way that you kind of did, or it's like something constant throughout their whole life and then they fully step in. So tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are and your story, because I just think it's a really neat one.
Thank you. Yes, it's been a wild journey, really, because I was not spiritual at all, at all, at all. And I feel like the universe gave me this lens because it helps me to connect with people on any level. Because I used to tell people like I was a hater. It was so opposite. I thought people that were into this work were cuckoo bananas, and now I'm like the head leader cuckoo banana. I'm like, let's get more, let's get weirder. So I was, raised in a very just traditional Catholic family. My family wasn't super strict, but like my schooling and everything, upbringing was pretty strict religious. And I always really wanted to connect. I was like, oh, I like love the idea of that. And I always loved the idea of connecting with a higher power. I was a super intuitive, little kid. I was very imaginative, all things projector. I was lost in my la la land, but it's now one of my greatest gifts, you know?
Yeah.
But growing up, I was, you know, deemed as like a very distracted, not a great student, which is on brand because now I spend a lot of time in meditation and the Akashic Records and in my own imagination. But as a child in a, you know, very strict school, it was not ideal. And so as I entered high school, I was really struggling. Also, just now knowing how I am meant to function as a projector and how out of alignment that I was. But my parents, or I think it was like my teacher or guidance counselor, were like, you know, we love Anna Grace. She's great, but like she's really struggling. I just like never wanted to do my schoolwork. I just couldn't be bothered with like schoolwork or things. I was really struggled with like rules and authority figures, but like I was like a likable kid. I wasn't like an asshole. I was just like living in la la land, truly. And but I really feel like in those times I was super intuitive. I just didn't know. I had lots of friends and I always loved to talk and tell stories, but like, you know, for school, they're like, wrap it up, Anna Grace. So anyways, my parents were like, just being the good parents that they are, and they care about me. I have great parents, but you know, unfortunately, uh, I was prescribed some pretty heavy Adderall and Vyvanse and all of the things. And I've done a lot of healing around that. And so my parents, like we've all looked back being like, we wish that hadn't have happened, but it did. And anyone listening who takes medication, if it works for you, great. I was very overprescribed in hindsight. Hindsight's always 2020. But as I went into college and I say I got on pretty heavy medication around 14, but I was doing great in school. But you know, I was just like cracked out, but like making straight A's. My parents were happy and yay. And I ended up in high school starting to, you know, get really thin because I was like taking this medication and it suppressed my appetite. And I was on a competitive cheer team and I did gymnastics and I was very active. And it really got to this place where I was super highly praised for how I was looking, being a lot thinner than I was. And I've never been someone that was overweight prior to this, but I've always been very fit. I've always been very strong. Like, and to this day, people see me, they're like, you look like a gymnast. Like I've got strong legs and like just kind of like, yeah. But I was really thin my like junior and senior year. I just remember everyone being like, oh my gosh, you look so great, blah, 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 da, 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 and getting all the praise. It really turned into this whole slippery slope, which I battled for the next, you know, 6 years, going into college, losing that structure, losing team sports, you know, having my own kind of weird schedule, being overprescribed medication, turning into a pretty gnarly eating disorder, super out of alignment, so unhappy, was a full-blown atheist at this point. I remember taking like some theology class that like really fucked me up and it got me so pissed off how much people fought. You know, we were like learning about the religious crusades and I'm like, why are we all fighting over, you know, different interpretations of like people are dying and fighting, you know, and I was so bothered over the division that had come in to play with, you know, when it comes to different religious beliefs, because I kept being like, if there is a God, you know, we would not be fighting like this. We would not be killing people. I was always really upset over things. So I got very far away from believing in any type of higher power. I was very narrow-minded in my own me. And I find often if you have any type of addictive thought patterns or eating disorder, you do kind of become obsessed with the body, obsessed with, you can't see anything outside of your own, you know, struggle. And it's, you know, unfortunate, but also on the flip side, the greatest thing that ever happened to me, because as I was headed into my 25th year, the 25th year of my life was when everything changed. It was right before then. It was right before then. And I feel like 25 is a very pivotal time and just in your 20s collectively. And they say literally your brain is like formulated more and all the things. But I was headed at this time, I was a wardrobe stylist. So I've always been into fashion and styling. I wanted to have, you know, I wanted to be an influencer, all of the things. But I was so fixated with the fashion realm of being like, I need to be skinnier. I need to work harder. It was just like going 100 miles an hour. I was working 3 jobs. I was a fashion editor magazine. I was doing all these things and I was kind of successful, but I was so overworked that it was just like stupid. It was stupid. So anyways, I'm flying out to LA. There's like a big fashion event. I have like a mutual friend who's on the flight with me who happens to be going to the same event. We weren't like super close, but she was there sitting in like the middle seat across the aisle. And I get on the plane, was going through just like a super intense work week of trying to get all this work done and being like, oh, I'm going to be wearing these outfits. I'm going to starve myself. I'm going to work out, just at an ultimate, I feel like rock bottom health wise. And keep in mind, this had been going on for at least 10 years. So this was 10 years of being malnourished, dehydrated, adrenal shot, all these things I had no idea, running on just fumes and coffee. I don't even know. And I get on the plane. I fell asleep for, what, maybe an hour and a half. And it was like a 4-hour flight out to LA because I was coming from Tennessee. And I fell asleep. I remember we hit some turbulence and I was kind of face down in front of me. I pop up and I immediately have like full body sweats from my head to my literal shins. And I always tell people when your shins are sweating, some shit is to go south. When your shins are sweating, something's not right.
Nothing, it doesn't usually sweat there. So something's going on.
Something's going on. And I just knew. I was like, I will never forget this old man sitting beside me. He was wearing overalls. He looked like a train conductor. He was like a cartoon character. I tapped him. Everyone was asleep. I woke him up and I'm like, listen, I need you to call help because something's like really wrong with me. And I was really scared. And the only thing I could always tell people is I remember feeling this like feeling of like urgency of like you're about to projectile vomit or like poop your pants. And I hate to be that graphic, but people listening understand that urgency where you're
like something needs to happen right now.
yeah, like, oh, like, and I'm, sitting down on an airplane and I'm just like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. But now I know that it wasn't just a bodily fluid. It was me. It was me about to literally leap out of my body. And so I tell people that I had this moment. I remember the flight attendant coming, trying to give me some juice. I'm like, we're so far past me drinking a cup of juice. This isn't like a blood pressure issue. I remembered like spilling it on, like, I was like my motor skills, I remember my peripherals went till I felt like I was blind, couldn't hear. And then I passed out. And for the next, what's so crazy about all of this is that this probably was 10 seconds in human time. But for me, exiting my body, it was, I don't even know how long, but way longer than that. And I literally felt myself this like massive, massive, like I tell people it's almost like this, what I would imagine like giving birth or this huge like pressure coming out. But then it was almost like this like euphoric, almost like I even want to use the word like orgasmic lately, like very like powerful feeling out of the body, like, oh my gosh, whoo, like you're stretching after being on a long car drive, like just felt so good. And I went from being so fucking terrified, I was terrified up until that point, to not terrified at all. I was so at peace, I was so calm, I was so like everything's okay, like just whatever. But I tell people my story wasn't that I was taken to the gates of heaven and like I was just pulled over my body. It was like I could see this version of me, and I saw these like two beautiful kind of like squiggly, jellyfishy, pulsating orbs of light. And I knew they were angels. And keep in mind, you guys, like I was a full-blown hater, atheist, did not believe in anything. And I'm like, but I knew. And I was like so happy they were there and being like, oh my gosh, thank God. And it almost makes me now realize, like, I wonder if I like knew them or felt them, or it was, I don't know, a loved one or something. And that was one thing that I learned, that anybody who dies, passes to the other side, you were never, ever alone, no matter if you lost a loved one, and then the hospital, they were alone. I promise you they weren't. There was just a team of angel light beings, ancestors. There's always someone there. And so I felt
beautiful.
So beautiful and so comforting. And it really did, before that I had such a weird fear of dying. I don't know why. I think everyone's had a thought once or twice about dying and being like, ooh, I don't want to think about it.
Yeah, like, ooh.
Yeah, like, ugh. But now I have made this such beautiful peace with it because I'm like, oh, it was just lovely. It was just so warm and lovely. But I did have, this hard realization where it was like I was getting this information from these angels being like, I did this to myself. I put myself in this bad, bad place, to the point where I'm on the brink of no return into that body. That body is going through it and you're beating yourself to a pulp. And I was just down bad all around medically. I was down bad. So I had all of this realizations, and the information was just sort of like, I don't know, it just came through me. And I knew, because I remember being like, this is fun. Everything's so fast. And like, I don't want to go back. It's so like hard and heavy and like slow being her. Like, just like, I don't want to go back into that body. And these, angels that I saw were pretty much telling me that I didn't have a choice and I had to go back and I had work to do. And I didn't know this at the time because I did not know what the Akashic Records were, but they were like, you're going to go back and you're going to teach, like you're going to be a teacher. And I'm totally like, I'm not a teacher. I don't even
You're like,
know.
I hated school.
Yeah, I was like so not interested in being a student. And I was going to go back and teach, and they're like, you have a message for millions of people and they need to hear it. And I also I was to write a book. You know, they gave me lots of conditions. And if anyone really is intrigued with near-death experiences, I have the first episode of my podcast is a very long in-depth story. And I feel like I've already gone way long in depth with it, but there's so many layers to it. Every time I tell the story, I remember something different or there's a different angle. And so, but anyway, I knew I had to come back. I had to write this book. I had to teach people, which I now know is about the Akashic Records and a lot of things that I'm doing on intuitive movement. There's just so many different healing modalities that I have stepped into, and also that I would raise a child that would also do something important. So I really had to come back.
Oh, that's so special.
I know. And so I was like, well, hot damn. I come back into my body. I am like, so I remember and it took me a really long time to even get comfortable telling this story because I was so freaked out. I so did not believe in any of that stuff prior to it. Obviously now, then I was like, I believe, I'm so sorry. I tell people, I'm like, if you stomp around saying you don't believe in God and the universe and all these things, I'm like, you might just fuck around and get struck by lightning. Cause that's how I feel like, that's what I feel like happened to me.
Yeah.
And
fuck around and find out.
Yeah, fuck around, the universe said fuck around and find out, Missy. But I am so glad. I am so glad. It was the best thing that's ever happened to me on so many levels. And this was my, early to mid 20s. I'm 30 now. So it's been years of a journey. Cause I think people were like, well, how did you go from being like a nothing to like a full blown spiritual teacher? And the first time I ever told that story on my podcast, it immediately went #1 on Apple, like immediately. And so even that was so crazy because I had so much resistance to sharing because I was already like had a huge following. I was a fashion stylist. I was working in Nashville doing music videos. I mean, it didn't really make sense for me to completely pivot my life and be like, I'm now going to talk about spirituality. Hey
guys, guess what?
I was successful. I was making good money. Like it was not necessary, but it just came to a point last year when I moved to Florida right before we connected. I could not talk about fashion anymore. I was like, so just I couldn't get myself up out of bed to even create content anymore because like there was this part of me that was like, this is what you're here to do and teach. And so I've been doing readings. I learned to read the Akashic Records the end of 2019. Then all through the pandemic, I was like, I just went into this like wormhole of like privately doing Akashic Records readings and reading for myself. But I did. I mean, I moved fast. Like my gifts opened up and they were open. Like I was like, wow, this is what I'm here to do. This is my purpose. And then it took me a few years to really get comfortable stepping into that and sharing every single day, sharing my gifts, sharing my readings. And, but I'm here, so it's been kind of a journey, but it's been,
I know I've said this like 1,000 times to you, like we have such similar stories. It's not even funny. Like you'll have to, if you haven't listened to my human design story, which is my #1 episode of my podcast. And I think our podcast came out like the same week.
That is so crazy.
Like what if our gifts all came in and mine was like a childhood thing and then just was like me stepping into it, and mine came through human design. But it's just so funny hearing your story, like just the synchronicities. And I resonate so deeply with what you're saying around like, it being kind of weird and woo-woo. And especially like I grew up Catholic as well and come from like a very like, Catholic family, like went to catechism my whole life, church the whole bit. And so it's like, it can be so uncomfortable being at this place where it's like, you're doing this sort of like energy work and these things. And it's just like so different from, I guess what people are used to. And so I can't believe you've only been like, when did you started publicly sharing it on your page?
Like a year and a half ago, max.
Wow. Okay. So I had no idea because I literally didn't know you until we did my episode on your podcast. And so that's crazy. Like I just assumed that you had been doing this for so long because it's so natural for you and you're so good at it. I mean, I saw you and we were in Nicole's spiritual summer camp And even just witnessing you there, I mean, it's just so crazy that when you do step into your gifts, like the amount of doors that open, it's like I feel like the universe or God or whatever denomination you believe in it, I feel like there's this thing that happens to a lot of us, actually most of us, and in fact maybe all of us, is like the second that we like actually step into alignment with what's meant for us, it's like all of a sudden we have like the floodgates open, and it's like, where have you been? It's like, here's this opportunity, and here's this person you're supposed to connect with, and here are these like messages and these gifts, and like here's money, here's abundance, here's like all of these things that were meant for you, that like you've just been like, because you were living so over here. It's like, it's just so cool. And I love hearing stories like yours, because I think we're in such a big shift universally as well, where like these spiritual gifts, like, yeah, like we're not like special people. You know what I mean? Like I don't know if you ever tell people this, like I always am saying, like, I'm not special, like this is something everyone can do. But I think that there are people like you and I who are paving the way in a modern way for people to be able to finally like open up their gifts and get involved. And I think the new paradigm, or the energy that our universe is moving into, is like spiritual gifts are going to be like so much more common, and I think it's going to be like an everyday practice. So it's just really cool to hear your story and how you kind of got here.
Oh, thank you so much. And I totally agree. I always tell people, like, you don't have to have a near-death experience to
Yeah.
open into your gifts, because I was just so far out of alignment. I couldn't have been further. And I feel like all the medication, everything that I was taking was just shutting down my intuition. It was like so disconnected. But I'm so grateful. Like, I personally needed to get that disconnected so that I know what people who feel disconnected, I can relate to them, and I know what it feels
Yeah.
like to not connect to self. So
Yeah. You
it
can
was
see
just,
them and go, I can help you. Like you can
yeah,
resonate with my story. Like I've been you,
totally. Like, I know what it feels like. I've been there, and I think I needed to experience that personally. But with that being said, on the flip side, everyone is intuitive. I tell people everyone has the ability to access the Akashic Records. Everybody has the ability to do any of this work. It's just like anything, it's a muscle. We just have to
Mm.
practice, just as we would go to the gym.
Yeah.
It's planted inside of all of us. It's always what I see whenever I go into someone's records or just play and the angelic realms. I mean, I call them angel readings, but
Yeah.
they're always showing like everything that you need is planted inside of you. It's just us accessing and listening and getting still and going within. So I feel like I am here to awaken that intuitive knowing inside of people. And even just like
Yeah.
listening to the podcast, listening to your podcast, everybody coming in with this intention of wanting to learn more about themselves,
Yeah.
that's summoning and bringing more intuitive guidance into their life. So I'm
Yeah.
with you on, it's the work that you do on human design. I mean, it was life changing for me learning more about my human design. So
Yeah.
it's so important, and I think so many more people are going to start stepping into their gifts. I'm really excited.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love human design, and Akashic Records is something so new to me still. I just had my first Akashic Records reading done in October.
How was
Uh,
it?
it was great. It was like one of those things where I just wanted to keep going. Like it ended and I was like, no, I just want to keep talking to this girl. And I'd love to do Akashic Records with you at some point, because I need to get like an experience fully. But before we dive too far into the Akashic Records, I had one question about your story, and then we'll talk all
Yes.
about it. So I wanted to just ask you, because as you were telling the story, so you came back into your body. So then you're in the plane still, right?
Yes.
And did
Yes.
anything happen? Like, were they like, is there a medical, professional
Oh,
on the plane? Was it anything like that?
totally. So, the one girl that I was traveling with, she literally was like, dude, you turned gray. But like I said, it wasn't for very long, which I
Mm,
think was, if I'd been out cold turkey for like, 5 minutes even, she said they would have landed the plane. Fortunately, there were some people around me that were like in the medical field, like just by
mhm,
trade, not like there wasn't like a medic on board or anything.
mhm.
But I do remember there was this one really sweet woman who was sitting in front of me, and she was holding my hand, like praying over me. It was
Oh,
really,
that's
she,
beautiful.
she knew that I was really, you could just tell everyone around me knew that I was like, there was a guy beside me and the woman in front of me, like they really knew that I was like really scared. And just in the time of like pushing the button, getting the flight attendant, that was kind of like I don't know, maybe a few minutes,
Mhm.
up until the point where I exited my body, which was really probably, I don't know, 15, 20, max 30 seconds. I don't know, of me
Yeah.
being unconscious, like fainting. But my friend did say they were really concerned because she was like, you turned gray. The flight attendant was pretty freaked out, but I came back and to my body. And that was a big thing with like part of the message that I received when I was out of my body was that like I knew I was going to be okay. They're like, you're
Mm,
fine. You needed to have this experience to wake you up. And the first thing that I knew was like I was like, I'm done taking medication that I was on. I had gotten to a point where I didn't need it anymore and I was abusing it anyways. And I was like, I'm done. And I think that it took, I mean, it's very addictive, a lot of any stimulant, really.
yeah.
I don't know what would have made me stop. And I feel like I just needed that experience. Medically, the doctor is like, you had a heart attack. But
Oh, so they had someone. So,
I went later after I got off of the flight.
oh my gosh. Okay.
But to me, the whole situation, like, because people love, they're like, wait, what happened? What happened? I'm like, I came back into my body. I mean, granted, I was like freaked. I was freaked out, but I was also calm. I don't know. I was more like, holy shit, that was crazy. But I knew I was going to be okay. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
I wasn't like worried about my health. It was just like that needed to happen so extreme to like really get my attention. And I also am kind of someone that really needs to see things to believe. I don't know if I would have I don't know. I don't know if I would be as gifted in the Akashic Records if
Very
I
1-3 of
had.
you.
Yes,
Yeah.
literally. I mean, the original name is the investigator martyr. Me, martyr, dies to the cause.
Yeah.
Must quite literally a martyr is someone who dies for the cause, for the mission.
Yeah.
And I did. I died so that I could come back and, share this experience. But from a health standpoint, I really was totally fine. Now, I still had to recover, from horrific disordered eating, healed the
Mm,
adrenals. There was a lot, and it took time, it wasn't
yeah.
instantaneous. But the whole experience in itself, I mean, most people, I understand the term near death experience, but now as I've gotten older, I'm like, it was just a miracle. It was a miracle.
Mm,
It really was. And
yeah.
I'm so grateful for the experience and the little kind of angelic orbs. These two specifically I remember are the two that I still work with in the Akashic Records. Like they kind of are
It's
always
beautiful.
with me and support me. And it's been so comforting knowing that I'm not alone. I never feel alone. I know if anything's going on, that they're there and that I can talk to them and they're going to help me. And everyone has that. Everyone has a guardian angel. Everyone has a loved one that's watching over them. Everyone has so much more support. And that's their whole job is to support us. These
Yeah.
beautiful angels are here to watch over us. So it's very comforting. If anyone out
Yeah.
here is struggling, ever feels like they're alone, I promise you're not. You have
Yeah.
so much help
Spirit
and
guides.
yeah, totally. So
Yeah.
much.
So, okay, so the plane lands and you are like, holy fucking shit. Like, what just happened?
Ah,
And so you said you were there for a work trip. So do you go on the work trip and then do you go home and then you kind of are like what do you do from there? Like, are you now talking to spiritual,
so
like going to see the psychics or the doctor? Like what, tell me
yeah,
that whole journey.
okay, so yeah, so I have this great awakening. I remember getting really into, I remember the first self-help spirituality book that I read was The Universe Has Your Back by Gabby Bernstein.
Oh,
Such a,
I love her deck. It's on my shelf over there. And sometimes it's on my desk. I was gonna pull it up.
yeah, yeah, it's such a good one. I feel like that's such a good gateway drug book for like, spirituality or religious text because it really kind of goes either way. I think it's just like a really beautiful, all-encompassing story. And it was the first book that I read that I was like, okay, I am I've got to learn everything. Like I went on like first I would say I went on like a health journey. I remember to hire like a personal trainer and I hired someone like a nutritionist because I was, at this point I'm 25 and I have no eating patterns. I'm trying to get off all this medication.
And you don't
Uh,
drink, right? Like,
I don't
so at this time, were you drinking or had
oh
you already
yeah.
stopped drinking? Okay.
I was still drinking, but I got off of it, like, and I always tell people it went in waves for me. Like
Hmm.
first I got off of Adderall and Vyvanse, and that was huge
Hmm.
for me because
Hmm.
I had been heavily reliant on it. And I always tell people like I was misusing it. I was taking it all the time to like not eat or stay up late or like go
Hmm.
out. Like, you know,
Yeah.
there's this differentiation of between intention. There's people that are like, oh, I really need that. I'm like, well, that's great if you're taking it with a better intention than I was, because I can assure
Yeah.
you I did not have good intentions with it. And anyways, so that was the first thing. It was like getting off of that. And that was huge. And then it was like, okay, now I want to just take care of my body, get healthier, like I started, you know, doing like I worked with a trainer who kind of got me eating more, just like eating like 3 meals a day. I
Mm-hmm.
just got me kind of like getting a little bit on a schedule. And then I was like reapproached movement, but like way slower. Like I'm just gonna walk because I was just doing the most before. And I'm a projector. I'm not supposed to do that.
Yeah, everything you've been saying, I've been thinking about you being a projector. It's just so funny because even as a kid, you're like, I was all over the place. And it's just so funny because it's very unprojector-esque, but it just goes to show how unaligned you were actually in so
Yeah.
many ways where you're like, pushing it to the limit, hustle bustle when it's like projectors are like, the most easeful people, which is totally you now. It's crazy.
I know. And so I think I just started with what I knew, which was getting my physical being healthier and happier. But at the time, you know, I was also still like in my, or, you know, I guess at this point, entering my late 25, 26, 27, later-ish 20s of still going out and drinking and partying. Like I didn't give that up, but I got clean of like all like substances. Like I, you know, before I would take like Molly and like I was just like wild. I love to go to like festivals and all these things. And like I got that was done. Anything that fucked with my heartbeat, done.
Mm.
So that was like the first wave. And then I became obsessed with reading, which is the very 1-3 in me researcher. I
Yeah.
collected data from all over every podcast, every book, and I've always been a voracious reader. I can read a book in a day if I have nothing else to do. Since I was a kid, I loved to read.
Mhm.
So I read, I studied. It
Also
was just
very projector of you.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
I, for, you know, the next year, just accumulated information, had such a massive spiritual awakening, really years 25 and 26. And I would say it wasn't until really because I had roommates and was still just like being a normal person. Like it wasn't like I just like became this like spiritual guru overnight, like at all.
Sure.
Like, no. And that's also kind of a big part of now that I've learned in my Akashic records, like I'm here to make this very like I'm here to live a balanced life. I'm not supposed to just meditate all day. And, you know, I think for some people that find a retreat off in Hawaii and they live there, and that's amazing and beautiful. But like, I'm here to be like a very modern, normal spiritual creature.
Mhm.
And so I just kind of took it step by step, day by day. And it wasn't until, yeah, I would say I was living alone, which was when I was about 26, and it was before the pandemic. I was going to see a psychic because it was like once I stopped taking Adderall and Vyvanse, all that stuff really disconnects us from our intuition severely. Like we can't pick up on our body's natural cues. And when I stopped, it was like my intuition was like freaking boom, like came back so tenfold. Like I remember too, spirits would just like come to me. Like it was when I was sleeping, I would have these dreams and the dream would happen the next day. Like crazy stuff was happening. And I thought I was losing my mind. I really did not know. I didn't have any vocabulary that I have now. And I didn't know anyone like me. I had never even been to a psychic or medium. I was raised thinking those were bad. Like I just didn't know nothing. And I was working on set for a famous country artist, which is another thing I always tell people, like every celebrity has spiritual counsel. They do.
Mhm.
They all work with mediums and psychics and astrologers and human design readers. And that is something that I witnessed working on a lot of sets, but they don't share it publicly. But I was working on set, and this one girl who's a hairdresser, she's like, you need to go see this guy. His name is Frank. He's like the best psychic medium in Nashville. And so I went and saw him, and he was like, I was just fascinated. I went and saw like several psychics back to back too. Like
Mm.
after I saw him, I was like basically trying to like see if they would say the same thing or like quiz them or like I don't know. I was still
Yeah.
even just in my researcher mode.
You're like holding information, like, will they pick it up?
Yes,
Yeah.
totally. And because I guess I was still, I don't know, a skeptic. I'm not really sure. I just don't think it was so
Yeah.
funny. I couldn't understand how it
Well, you're a
worked.
1-3 too, so like being that martyr of you, it's like, okay, I'm gonna have to experience it, and it's gonna have to blow my freaking socks off because not only
Yeah.
that, like the one in the investigator piece of you, that researcher in you is probably like, okay, like like logically this doesn't make sense, but for you to then go to all these people and then I guess you'll have to explain how it happened.
Well, they really all said similar things. They were like, you know, you are a psychic, you are a medium, you have all these gifts, and that you're here to do readings and to really share your gifts with the world. And I was like, there's no way I could do readings for people. Like, I absolutely not. I couldn't even imagine, couldn't even fathom. It's like, no, crazy. Well, fast forward to when the pandemic happens and the world shuts down. And at this point, I'd had my Akashic Records read. I think I always get so confused now with time because it's like pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. But
Yeah.
I was living in this house that I was living alone in Nashville, had my Akashic Records read, I believe in 2019. And then towards the end of 2019, I learned it was like very quickly, like I had my Akashic Records read, and it was like I was fascinated. In the middle of the reading, I stopped her and I said, "Can I access the Akashic Records?" And she was like, "Yes, absolutely." And she gave me like a book recommendation. It was like super casual. She was still kind of new at it too,
Wow.
but it invoked something inside of me. And the cool thing about having your Akashic Records read is it's an activation that happens inside of you, like on a cellular level as well. And I ordered the book off of Amazon. It was basically delivered, that week. I read half the book. It was interesting. I never even really finished the book. Because I don't think I think there was some information that I didn't actually need at the end of the book. I read the first half of the book, knew how to open the Akashic Records, and I was like, oh, I've done this before, and
Wow.
at least in some other life. Like it was the most
Wow.
magical thing. I remembered it. I was like so comfortable. I was so happy. I was just like, this is my thing. Like I found it. Hello.
Yeah.
What I'm supposed to be doing. And that was, years after I had the experience where, these angels are like, you're here to teach people this message for millions of people. And I'm like, what's the message? What am I teaching? Come back, I have more questions. And, it took a few years. But once I found the Akashic Records, I was like, this is my thing. So I started doing readings. I immediately had a wait list. I immediately had people coming, and I was working, in fashion in Nashville for a lot of like high-end clientele, celebrities, reality TV. And I really just pivoted and had this kind of like celebrity reality TV clientele. And it was great because I didn't tell anyone that I was even doing readings, and it was they didn't either. But I was very much so kind of in the closet about all of this. It was like word of mouth, and I was just working with like CEOs of companies. And my first reading I ever did, which is bold, was like for the CEO of a company who's I am good friends with her, but still she was like, I trust you. I want you to do this reading for me. And I was like, okay. And I did it. And she just like cried. She was like, that was the most beautiful experience of my whole life. I was like, also, as it was happening, I was in disbelief. I was like, I
Yeah.
can't believe we just did that. Like, that was crazy.
Yeah. Well, it goes to
Yeah.
show like I think what's interesting too, and like the story you've described is like, okay, so after that whole experience, like you said, the first thing I did was like I got my body right. Like I fixed my adrenals, I got off the things. And so even though it's like, okay, it took a few years for you to finally step into it, it was really like those angels were saying to you, like, you need to get your vessel clean. Like you need to like clear this out. You need to, and so even though like it took a couple years, like it was still actively happening. It was like setting you up to be able to receive this information and then for you to have these like prolific readings with people to like you're it's like such a medium or such a vessel for them now to um hear like messages from their angels or spirit guides or yeah, it's just so beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah. So it's been a journey. So I always tell people like it wasn't quick, it wasn't overnight, but it was just layer by layer, step by step. I just kept marching. And that's my best advice for anyone that's embarking on a new journey. Like as long as you just keep going, one step each day, you're going to get to this path of really just feeling happy and fulfilled. That was all I wanted. I wanted to
Yeah.
just fulfilled. I was so unfulfilled with only sharing like fashion content on Instagram. And I just knew there was more that I was meant to share and help connect people with. Cause like ultimately, like my two areas are to connect people with their intuition and their soul's purpose. I work
Yeah.
with soul's purpose, which is in everyone's Akashic record, and everybody has one. And I was like, wow, if I have this ability to tap in, I have this gift and I got this second chance, I have to share it. It's just
Yeah.
if I didn't. And, for years I was so afraid to share it. The moment that I did share it, I always tell everyone it was not as scary as I thought it was going to be. I barely got any negative feedback. And I'm sure I
Yeah.
lost followers, but like, whatever. It
Yeah.
was in our mind, we made it up so much scarier. Like, oh, people are going to think it's so weird. I'm like, people have actually been really receptive. Even people that I thought who wouldn't be are like, oh, like, that's interesting. Tell me more. They're
Yeah.
curious.
Yeah. I felt like that when I got into human design, like there were people who came out of the woodwork and there were people, like you said, that like kind of like brushed a little bit out of my life, which was totally fine. But then there are people that were like, oh, wow, like these people that I didn't even know paid attention to who I am or what I do or like so interested in like are here to support me. And so it's always so cool, like again, just stepping into that purpose and seeing things that happen. But before we talk a little bit more about, I guess, what you do now, can you explain Akashic Records in the most like foundational, basic, like, I don't
Yes.
know, like seventh grade level, like what is like the easiest way to just kind of describe it?
Yes, I actually just recently, I'm so glad I'm coming on your podcast now because I just recently went in the Akashic Records and channeled the best metaphor because I kept being like, I need easier because it made perfect sense to me, but it's complex.
Yeah.
And it's not super common, and even I have a lot of friends who are spiritual that are like, oh, I never heard of it.
Hmm.
But at its core, the Akashic Records is the most ancient modality that exists on our planet. Our planet has so much information that's being energetically exchanged, through the moon and the tide and the stars. I mean, there's so much happening,
Yeah.
right? And the best way that I can put the Akashic Records into an analogy is I want you guys to think about you in your life as an iPhone, okay? And so with this iPhone, we have all of our, I'm trying to think of like concert videos, our voice memos, our beautiful photos, so many things that we've collected on this cell phone. And I want you to think this cell phone also has the last 5 cell phones, because every time you get a new phone, you just conglomerate on to the next one, to the next one.
Mhm.
So this iPhone has all of this information. Well, if it really held, every single photo you've ever taken, it would be so overwhelmed. It wouldn't even work. It would just be like kaput. So what do? We upload it to the cloud, right? So our
Mm.
cloud is what our Akashic record is. It's an energy portal that's really our soul's library. And this is how it works. Like, think of your iPhone is like this body right now. And it also remembers the past 5 lives, right? The past 5 iPhones are all stacked on top of each other and uploaded into our cloud. So every thought, every memory, everything that we've ever existed in our soul, because people know like our subconscious mind and our soul never forget. That's why
Yeah.
we'll have weird ailments in the body that show up and we're like, this doesn't make any sense. I don't remember. It's like, because you
Yeah.
don't remember. Or it could have been from another life. Who knows?
Body keeps the score.
Body keeps score. It does. And so going into the Akashic records is really like having this spiritual cloud, and we can download information from the cloud just as we can to our iPhone. It is quite literally an identical replica of how our technology works because we're electromagnetic beings. And so this is our metaphysical library, and it exists. I always tell people it's just like I'm playing in an angelic realm, just as you would access any type of mediumship information. There is the Akashic records. You say a specific opening prayer to connect with the Akashic records. And then there's what I call the keepers of the Akashic records, which are kind of like your librarians. And it's
Mm.
really like it's kind of like you call on your higher self. Your higher self accesses this information, and our little librarians are our little angels who, give us this information. Then we bring it back down into our physical and, for our clients, for all the people. But inside of the Akashic record is every bit of information about yourself you could ever want to know on a soul level. So you can access past lives, you can access future timelines, you can access healing remedies, you can access your soul's purpose. I mean, what I really believe is that the Akashic Records is what people call God's plan. I mean, the Akashic Records has been
Yeah.
noted throughout time. It's written on hieroglyphics and Egyptian pyramids. It's noted and referenced in the Bible. It's so many places hidden in plain sight, but it is
Wow.
a kind of having like a new resurgence, I guess, where it's getting more
Sure.
popular, even though it's been around forever. But
Yeah.
it is this kind of this infinite information. It really is. It's
Yeah.
just like a library of infinite information and wisdom that we can tap into.
Yeah. Oh, there's just so many synchronicities I just want to talk about. Like, even with you talking about the Akashic records and like the energy that we all carry. I don't know if you know the science of neutrinos, which is like a big part of the human design system. Are you familiar?
No.
Okay, we'll have to dive into it because we could go down a rabbit hole, but there's a whole
Okay.
science around like how human design came to be, which is about basically the science around neutrinos, which is like a small percentage of an atom. And so it's this like it's a piece of energy. Like there's billions, if I go like this, there's billions of neutrinos that are like literally going through my thumb right now, and they carry light and information from stars and the sun. 70% of them come from the sun. So that's why like when we're born, whenever our birthday is, our sun sign is like, so I'm born in November, like November 9th. So I'm a Scorpio. So like 70% of the neutrinos come from that Scorpio energy that was taking place at that time. So it's cool to hear because like you kind of referenced something around that, and it's cool just to see how things all connect. Like I find the more spiritual I get, it's like we're all kind of speaking to the same things in different ways. Like I don't know if you feel like that, where it's
Yeah.
like I'll hear synchronicities like when I'm talking about human design to yeah, like even to Akashic Records. It's like there's just so many like things and how they all kind of intertwine. And I thought what was really interesting is you were describing like, okay, the Akashic Records, and you referenced like in terms of mediumship, you're kind of like, it's kind of a similar thing. So
Yeah.
do you think there's a difference? Because the way that I feel like I've had Akashic Records described, and even through the way you described it, is like I feel like when I do psychic mediumship work, and I do more mediumship work than psychic stuff, I'm really good at connecting to like people who have passed. And I feel like I'm kind of like I don't do an opening prayer, but I kind of get into this like meditative state. And then all of a sudden I'm like just seeing like information come to me. Like, is that the same that's happening in Akashic Records, or is there a difference? And like part of me then is wondering like, is that piece of Akashic Records and that prayer like something that like more people should be doing? Like, is there a ritual or a ceremony there that like is maybe missing in some of these like psychic mediumship rituals or like
Yeah.
practitioners?
Maybe, I think everybody has their own unique way of accessing. And I have created, it was like I told you, I read half of the book and then I didn't end up reading the rest of it because I felt like I was going to create my own process. And so in September, I created a how to read the Akashic Records course. So for
Mhm.
anybody who's listening who's like, I feel super called to this, anyone can do it. Anyone can
Yeah,
access it.
I need to
Um,
take that course, and I need to
yeah,
do a reading. I need to do all the things.
yes, you should because you can access the Akashic Records.
Yeah.
So this is how it works for me. I mean, I always tell people it's totally different for everyone, and I just try not to like put too much of an expectation or a pressure on how your gift is going to come through because,
Mhm.
but it is like I go into a meditation. I take everyone in my course through like my rituals, pre-reading rituals, and then I do a opening prayer, and I personally channeled my opening prayer because whichever person you learn about, I feel like every teacher carries their own unique frequency that you're going to work with.
Mm,
Mine is like very grounded, it's very safe, it's very kind of modern, and it feels like light and playful, honestly, like the energy that I work with. But there are some people that just want to go in for past life. Like I don't necessarily like specialize in that. I specialize
mm.
in soul's purpose and kind
Okay.
of kind of what's going on in this lifetime. But there's just honestly, there's infinite things you can
It's
do.
the records. Yeah, it's like what's
Yeah.
ever happened before.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I open them and so I actually just did a mediumship reading the other day. Honestly, I kind of do everything. It's confusing because some people will come to me for Akashic Records and then we start talking and they're like, oh, my dad passed. And then I'll kind of switch gears and then do like a
Mm,
mediumship. And I could see her dad. He came up right behind me, his arms on my shoulders, and I saw him like very visually,
mm,
mediumship wise. But when I do the Akashic Records, I actually channel journal because
mm,
it's so much information that it's just a lot of words. It's very informational. It's different than like I couldn't just see like a picture. It's
mm.
very much so. And I'm clairvoyant and clairaudient.
Okay, I was
And
just gonna say,
so
like, is it like do the clairs kind of come into play here? Because
yes,
okay.
totally. Totally. So I'm clairaudient. So I'll open up my journal as soon as I do the opening prayer and kind of all my rituals, which is all taught in my course. And I'll immediately just start kind of writing whatever's coming through. And I usually have my clients submit 2 or 3 questions because you can ask the records whatever. So I always tell people ideal questions are who, what, where. I just don't do when, but you'd also do
Mm,
how. So I try to keep people off of timeline because the Akashic Records, the word Akasha means cosmos, space.
mhm.
And as we know, anything outside of this human realm, time is very hinky pinky. It's
Yeah,
kind of whatever we
yeah.
make it. So I keep people away from when, and I also don't ever answer yes or no questions because I always tell people that
Mm.
there's no such thing really as yes or no. There's no
We
such
have
thing as
free will.
you have free will. And I do not put myself in a position of power to tell you yes or no. That's you come to those decisions, but I will give you all the information around it. So instead of saying, should I marry this person? Right. That would be a yes or no. That I always tell people like, I'm not God. I'm just channeling this information, right? It's coming right through me. I'm an instrument. So what you could say is, what is this person's role in my life? What lesson am I to learn from this person or from this relationship? Right. So I can give you all of that information. That's like a little bit of kind of like a juxtaposition on questions and like how the Akashic Records works. It's very much more so wordy, wordy, wordy. So when I open my journal and I connect, I will just start immediately channeling on this kind of right side of my head. And I will write out like six pages of my composition per client. Like it is a lot of information, but I'll answer their questions and then I'll whatever else that just like they need to hear, whatever else comes through. And then by the time I get on a call with them, so I do that right before, like 20, 30 minutes before, by the time I get on a call with them, then if they need anything else in like the psychic or mediumship realm, I can just like kind of tap into all of it. So it's kind of like a unique combination of everything.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's so cool. I love it. I also think too, have you read Many Lives, Many Masters?
Yes, love.
Okay. I was like also like feeling when you were talking about the keepers, I was like, those are like the masters and like, and I think a big part of that book, it's one of my favorites, is when they talk about how like these masters or like a lot of us come to life with these contracts and some of us have like I guess we're at like different levels, and like so maybe perhaps you're at a higher level where it's like you've lived so many lives that like you're here to teach a lot of this to people who, haven't lived as many lives too. It's just reminding me so much of that. And so then I guess with your soul purpose work with you mentioned like contracts and things, like do you do a lot of work with like, okay, your soul purpose, you sign this contract that's in the Akashic Records to come to this life and have this experience? Is that a lot of what you're tapping into then?
Yeah, yeah. So, I always tell people it's like if we were to tap into, I think a lot of people are familiar with the term like God's plan, right? If we were to look at what is our ultimate highest timeline, our highest version of self, I have the ability to jump into that timeline. So if I'm connecting immediately with your highest version of self, and I'm like, okay, these are the next three things that I see you doing. This is what you're here to do. And they always jump out to me as like themes, and themes are codes. I don't really ever work with the term contract, but it's all kind of the same thing.
Sure.
But like themes are codes. So I'm like, well, you're really here to help people like with your music and to create this sound, I don't know, whatever, everybody's is so different. But it is interesting because I always end up channeling their human design too, because I'm always like, are you a projector? They're like, yes. So it's like it does have a lot of alignment with their soul's purpose. And so I can kind of go in and see like, okay, these are the themes that you're supposed to be working with. And then the person usually isn't even like over there. But a lot of times they'll be like, oh yeah, when I was a kid, I loved that. Or like, I always wanted to be that. Or like, so they often will have some like remembering of like, oh yeah, that like, I've always wanted to do that, but I never told anyone, or I was
That's
afraid,
funny.
yeah. And so then we'll kind of work backwards. Like, okay, well, here's some of these great life themes for you. And this is what your higher self is sending me. Let's look at maybe what's holding us back or what we're afraid of or what we haven't yet worked through. Right. So, like, I kind of help clear out any blocks or maybe some limiting beliefs that are keeping them stuck or stagnant. So it's kind of like this, like, okay, let's look forward the next three steps and some of these big life themes because a lot of people I'll tell them like, they're like, why did this thing happen to me? And I can see I'm like, oh, well, it makes perfect sense because you're going to go on and do a TED talk about this, or, like there's
Yeah.
something is very pivotal for them. And I think anytime I do a reading, it's always like, I always come from like the highest place of empowerment. Like I think I have, if I do say so myself, I think I have incredible discernment
Yeah.
on really helpful and what's empowering versus what's not. I've had readings that are both. I've had readings that I'm like, wish you didn't tell me that. Now I'm
Yeah.
thought about that for 3 months until it happens. And so I don't dabble in any of that. I really try to keep it at our highest like frequency of like mission empowerment for people. Like I would say
And
empowered and
practical.
practical. Yeah. Yeah. I really try to break it down. And then also like I do kind of my own little extra stuff behind the scenes where I kind of clear out some stuff that's maybe around them. But I always, want to keep people just feeling super safe and empowered. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so cool hearing everything that you're doing, and it's just so magical. And we're so lucky to have you on this planet, that you're able to guide so many of us to our highest versions of self. And I think we're at a time where so many of us need that. I feel like the pandemic was such a pivotal moment for so many of us, but I also feel like it's knocked a lot of people down. And so if anyone's listening that is looking to get connected a little bit closer to their calling, I think Anna Grace is someone you definitely want to get in touch with. And so that said, I know you mentioned you do Akashic Records readings, and I think that you have to join your newsletter to get access to that, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
my scheduling link goes out in my newsletter only. I always tell people there's so many weirdos out there impersonating me, and I always get so embarrassed because they send like the creepiest messages.
Oh my God, they did that to me forever. It's so annoying.
So annoying. So that way, just for everybody's safety, my scheduling link only goes out in my newsletter, and the newsletter really only goes out once or twice a month. I'm like, I promise I won't spam you if you join. I also do lots of channeled messages. I do like a monthly guidance, what's going on in the cosmos, what our angels are saying about the month, what the themes are. It was actually really funny because right before I got engaged, I was doing this like whole like reading on the podcast. I was like, there's like so much surprise and elements of new beginnings and all of these things, and I was like, literally didn't realize that I was like also doing like a live prediction of my engagement, but it was like kind of fun because I was so surprised I got engaged. But it was really fun because everyone was like, we loved like watching this unfold. So I do lots of live readings on the podcast too. But yeah, my newsletter, all of my information on courses, how to read the Akashic Records, a note from the Akashic Records goes out. And I'm actually moving into doing like some group readings and some group intuitive dance. I'm really into like freeing the body from any stagnant, stale energy, anything that's holding people back. Like I am here to make people do the thing. I am here to align you with your intuition and your soul's purpose. And I will die for the cause. I will do whatever. I'm like, I will do whatever.
Committed to the bit.
I am so committed to the bit. I'm like, till I die and one more time. I'm like a cat with 9 lives. You can't kill me. I'll just keep coming back with like more for people to do. So yeah, and then yeah, anyone can find me at Anna Grace Newell, Age University Podcast on Instagram, both of those. I got 2 accounts, and there's lots of things to connect with.
Yeah, I'll link it all down below so people can click into it. If you want to hear me on Anna's podcast, I will also be linked down below. And yeah, it's been so great to have you here. Such a pleasure to be in your presence. And thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to share with us about the Akashic Records.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm honored to connect with your community, and I just adore you.
Oh, thank you. If this episode has energized you, I ask you to share it or to send it to someone where it can make a big difference in their life. And please tag me with your shares, something you learned from this episode or that you love from it. I'm at The Design of You on Instagram. Also, please DM with questions or feedback or whatever. I love to stay in touch with you. Thank you so much for your support, and consider subscribing to this podcast and leaving me a 5-star review so we can continue to grow together. Thank you, and I love you oh so much. See you soon.